Mr. Natural's music school here in lovely San Francisco, California, Haight-Ashbury district. Welcome. So what we've been doing is talking about the staff. Last week, actually 2 weeks ago, I hope you all had a happy Thanksgiving, by the way. I did, and I ate turkey for like 4 days. I'm sure you're turkeyed out until next year. This week, what we're going to do, last week I talked about a brief history of music in general, and then how the staff developed, and then how it developed, and then it overdeveloped, and then after it had been overdeveloped, it had to be underdeveloped again until we found the great compromise that we have at the moment. This week, what we're going to talk about is the staff. We're going to talk about the ABC system that is in present use and how it is a fixed system. I'll explain what I mean by that. The system that I've developed and that we've been using here at Mr. Natural's classroom, since I guess I developed it back in the 1970s, pre-70s. Then in 1973, when I was working with William Russo and Michael West, and we developed a theater company called the San Francisco Free Theater, which was based on Bill Russo's Free Theater in Chicago. And it was an improvisational theater, basically, based on music theory concepts. And you can see some of those things that we did in the workshop. If you go look at the workshop I did at the library about 10 years ago, you'll see there's in the uploads area down in the what we call playlist, there's a playlist called Workshop. And if you just skim through some of those workshops, workshop I think 1 through 5, I've got listed up there. Those exercises were the exercises that we used to teach both music and improvisation. And during that period of time, I was brought in by Chuck Mills, who was the director and co-director of the theater, to teach music theory. And the problem was the ABC system was originally developed by, as I mentioned last week, a guy credited with it, Otto Klugney, who came up with the ABC idea in order to write books. And before that, people used what we know as a movable solfege system called do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do, which is basically in Latin. And I think most people out there have heard do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. If not, go watch The Sound of Music and listen to the song that Julie Andrews sings called Do, a deer, a female deer, Re, a drop of golden sun, etc. That system was developed way back at the time pre-Pythagoras. And Pythagoras was about 535 BC. And he was the first person to do scientific experiments on strings in order to understand why the mass of different strings produce different sounds or frequencies, why weights on the thing, the tension on the string would change, and how humidity and weather would change the tunings, etc. And what happened is, in those scientific experiments, he was the first one to codify a method or a system for understanding music. And from in Pythagoras' time, you have to understand, being in the university, we talk about the Ivory Tower University. This is where the Ivory Tower University idea got started. Pythagoras recognized that there were people in the community who were a little bit smarter than everybody else and needed more extensive education. And in his developing these concepts of music and the ratios between strings, which created a tuning system, one of the first tuning systems we have, called the Pythagorean tuning system, based on what's called the comma of Pythagoras. Many of you might want to go look up the comma of Pythagoras, 1.59, etc. And in that system, he realized that there were lots of people who had perfect pitch. And people who had perfect pitch were able to sing. They were able to hear a string, and you could say, oh, this string is C, and then from that on, they could use that as a reference point for figuring out what all the other notes were. And people with perfect pitch, what they would do in order to get into the university is they would have tattooed on the palm of their hand a pentagram, you know, a five-pointed shape, pentagram, or a star, which has in the center of it a pentagram. And in each of those points on the star, we had what I call 1, 2, 3, 5, 6. And people would have to not only show them the tattoo in order to, you know, they'd open up a slit in the door like an old speakeasy and go, "What's the secret code word?" And you'd have to hold up your hand and show that you had the, you know, the pentagram on your hand. But more importantly, you had to sing, da 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 da. And I just sang it out of tune, just to show you I have relative pitch. So people with perfect pitch could sing that little thing, and the doors were open, and they were allowed into the university. So the idea of the university, the ivory tower, the idea that there was an elite bunch of people out there who could understand music directly without the need for relativism, as we might call it, became very prevalent, and those people were gifted people who were allowed free access to the university. That concept and that notion, that idea of elitism has hung around with music theory since that time. When Otto Klugny changed it to the ABC system, it was a fixed, unmovable system for learning to read music on the staff that was developing during the 10th, 11th, 12th, 13th, and 14th centuries. And by the time we get to the 14th century, this method for reading had pretty much developed itself about as far as it is today. And since the 14th and 15th century, that system has been in play, and that is the system that's being taught in schools all over the world. And we're going to show you how it works on the staff. We'll show you some ways that they teach people to create what we call mnemonics, which is a way of memorizing the lines and the spaces on the staff. So first, a quick recap. We talked about what happened is first a line was developed, and this line was called, we'll say this line was called C. Everybody sang in the key of C, basically, at that time. And then what happened is they developed a thing called ledger lines. And with the ledger line, we could now notate 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 pitches quite easily. We could have one pitch that was outside of the system and one pitch that was higher than the system. So that gave us 6 and 7, gave us a 7-note scale. And since 5-note scales were what was prominent at that time, people were able to write, basically. They also used these pens which had a flat spot on them. So you put this flat spot and made a little like that. I don't know if you can see that on the camera, but basically what you get is what looks like a solid triangle or a little diamond shape. And that little diamond shape became the note head. In order to show rhythm, a system of flaggings or the shaft here was developed, and it came off the top of the thing, and then they would put these little things called flags on these in order to create rhythm values. There was also what we would call today the whole note, and then we had the half note, of course, and then the quarter note and the eighth notes, etc., etc. So what happens is if you go back to 9th, 10th, 11th century, you're going to see these little squares bouncing up and down a line system. Now, what happened is we wound up, as people started trying to sing together, choruses developed, and you needed 2, 3, 4-part writing. We went from plain song with one person singing to 2 people singing duets. And duets was the first time that we ran into versions of harmony. And some of the earliest versions of harmony were things called organum. It is not origami, like paper folding, but organum was a method of stacking one person on top of the other by an interval or a distance, and then those people would mirror moving up and down with each other. So you had these parts where one part was going this way, one part like that, and then if this guy moved up, this guy would move up, and the distance here between each other would be stacked, and usually it would be either a third or a fourth or a fifth. And these were the consonant intervals that we still use in counterpoint today. We have also added in the sixes as well. We have the major and minor third. We have perfect fourths and fifths, major and minor third. We have major and minor sixes. And those were used later on in the 12th and 13th century to start writing what's known as counterpoint. And so this system of organum, where everything was stacked by an interval and moved up and down, and then you could change the interval. So if you were in an interval of a third, you had a really nice mellow kind of sound. And then if you moved to your fourths and back to your thirds, your fourths would have less tension, and of course a fifth would resolve. And if they came together in sync with each other, that would resolve the thing. So usually at the end of some kind of organum, you'll see them coming together on a single note, and we call that unison or unity, and that resolved all the tension that was within the thing. What happened was they found out, because of the bandwidth of different people, that they needed to create more lines. So from the one line, which was in C, they developed a two-line system, and you'll see a lot of music written with the two-line system. Then later on, they moved to a three-line system. And in most of the cases here, the bottom line here was always the key of C. Then what happened was, someone said, well, we're going to stack a fourth above that C for the organum. And what happened is we need some way of writing or letting people know that the staff is not the default C anymore, it's in the key of F. Well, in the key of F, if you look at your circle of fifths or anywhere in any music theory book, you'll see that there is one accidental called the flat. And the flat was just really, they took a lowercase b and they basically slanted it like that. And it became this accidental known as the flat. And the flat was used here on this first line to tell people this particular piece of music is in the key of F. And so we had things in the key of C and in the key of F, and we had the first thing that could be considered a clef. Although, and it wasn't called an accidental back then, it was just a little mark, small letter B, that was put on the thing to let people know that the B flat was flatted, the B was flatted, and you were in the key of F. And so you would have scores when you had a grand score where you had, say, 2 scores. You had one which was the default C, and then you had another one that had the F on it, and this was 4 notes higher, this staff. And they could write the 2 parts on there, ta-da-da, and created what would be called the first grand staff. Well, what happened is, as time developed, they started adding more and more and more of these lines until eventually they had 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 lines. And you can see why we needed a line down here in the front to line all this up. And there we had, the staff had actually gotten this unwieldy. And of course we then needed to have the C put on a line, and we needed to have the flat. I'm gonna, for the sake of this, just put it up here. Or we needed to have that little flat symbol placed on a line, and that told us where do, or where the number 1 was, the starting point for the scale. Then, as far as scale was concerned, each region of the world had a church. And in those churches, you usually had monks and nuns who lived in that region. And what happened is people who were singing folk songs in that region developed a scale. And there wasn't one 5-note scale, a pentaphonic scale. There was Later, there was a minor pentatonic scale, which was actually the first. The major pentatonic scale was developed later, and then later on other types of scales. But almost all of the pentatonic scales used what we call major seconds today, or whole steps, and a minor third. And the scales were made up of them. And the problem with this is you can see that your eyeball could easily get lost. So if we had here, we were playing in the key of C, and we said, okay, that point right there is our 1 or our do, and now we can start singing the scale up and down. Well, what would happen is by the time you got down the staff over here with your notes, coming in over here, it was a lot more difficult to see this in relationship to that, especially when notes were way up here or they were way down here. It was very difficult for the eye to see that. And what happened is this staff system became more and more and more cumbersome. So what happened is a system of reduction happened, in which they started erasing some of these things here, and they developed 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 here. They had developed 5 lines, and I'm going to tell you the truth here. 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 spaces. For those of you who learned there are 5 lines and 4 spaces, which are still taught today in almost every theory book around, they're wrong. So trust me, you have the lines that you can put your things on the lines. You can also put them inside here on the spaces, and so we have a space here, 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 and there's a space there. So every time we draw a line, we have a space below and a space above, and when I draw another line, we have that plus the space above. When I draw another line, we have the line plus the space above. Every line creates 2 notes, okay? What was nice about the ledger lines is it extended with a single line, it extended adding 2 more notes on either end of the staff. And until finally we wound up getting a system in which we had 5 lines and 6 spaces. Well, the other thing that happened is the C and the little flat symbol could be moved around on different lines, so they could be, the notation could be pushed down into the staff or higher up on the staff, and when it was pushed down, it was usually for basses singing. If it was pushed up higher, it was for the altos and sopranos to sing. Later on, it split into 2 separate staffs. One staff being for just the basses and baritones, and one staff for the altos and the sopranos. And we'll show you a little bit more about that later. So what happened is up until right now, the 5-line, 6-space system was used. But since most people don't think outside the box and they're not creative, they see it as 5 lines and 4 inner spaces. And there had to be ways of explaining the ABC system and getting so people could use the ABC system. So what they did is Otto Cludney had A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I. Originally, A and B were a special case that we call A0 and B0, and then C was C1, D1, E1, etc., etc. And to this day, that system is preserved on the piano. You'll notice that on a full 88 key grand piano, the bottom 2 notes are A sharp or B flat, and B, and they are called 0. C is the first place where it's called 1, and then all the way on up. So what happened is the system went A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, C, D, E, F, G. And then later on, some people said, well, why are we only using these 2? Why don't we just take these guys and replace these over here and just start this whole thing all over again with A, B, and we'll call this A1 and B1, and then go on and start C2. So as weird as that is, it was because of this little piece of history that little kinkiness happened in the system. Now, in order to use this system, there's two things that you have to do. One, my suggestion is you put them out like this: A, B, C, D, E, F, G. And you get used to the idea of thinking of this as a circle. And what happens is, when we are going up the staff, let's say this is our C right here. When we're going up the staff, we would have A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and then all over with A, B, C, ledger line, D, E. And so when you're going up the staff in order to learn to read, you're rotating clockwise through this circle, this way. And this is up. Now, one of the problems with this system is they never taught anyone a system for reading it backwards. And you can try this yourself. Say the alphabet A, B, C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C, D, E, F, G. Now, try it backwards. G, F, E, D, C, B, A. Try it fast. G, F, E, D, C, B, A. Now, in order to read down the staff smoothly, you have to be able to do this in your mind. G, F, E, D, C, A. G, F, E, D, C, A. G, F, E, D, C, B, A. G, F, E, D, C, A. I can actually think of it in a circle backwards faster than I can verbalize it. And one of the things that I did is took a little ball, wrote A, B, C around the center of the ball, hung it on a string, rotated it like that, and as it rotated, I would say A, B, C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C, D. It would stop, and then it would reverse. D, E, F, G, A, B, C, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and then it would stop. F, E, D, C, B, A, G, F, E, D, C, B, A, G, F, E, C, D, B, A, C, stop, and reverse C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C, D, E, G, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, A, B, stop, reverse B, A, G, F, E, D, C, B, A, G, F, E, D, C, G, A, G, and just meditating and calming myself down and watching it happen every time it hit my eye, I was able to teach myself in a fairly short period of time to do the alphabet forward and backwards. And this greatly improved my ability to read going down the staff. Now what happened is we needed this placed on the staff, and in order to teach people how to do this, they've over the years come up with various mnemonic systems. And one of the mnemonic systems is we later developed these things called Clefs. And what Clefs is simply a letter of the alphabet. It's just simply a letter of the alphabet written in Old English using an Old English font. And the Old English fonts, specifically if you look at the Bible, what they would do is they would take the first letter of a paragraph and it would be extremely graphic. They would take, say, the letter F, and they would put the letter F in there, and they would put all kinds of serifs on it, and they would have flowers, and they would have leaves, and they have vines hanging off of it, etc., etc. And so what happened is, taking these Old English letters, eventually actually a plethora of clefs. There were probably 40 or 50 different types of clefs. Even the bass clef that we use today actually started out upside down like this with two dots to show where it was, and later it was reversed and turned around. So if we look very carefully at the evolution of this, it finally landed on just 3. And the first one was this one, which today we refer to as the alto, or the viola clef, or the alto clef. And this is actually equal to the letter C. I know it doesn't look like the letter C that much because, again, it used to be like this, and then eventually it got turned around, and people needed to have some way of Xing to mark the spot, so they indented it like that, and then they put 2 dots on it, and I don't know why cent or percent happened, and you'll see if you look in, if you look this up on Wikipedia where they show these, you'll see this got turned around eventually. So it looks like the letter, it went from the letter looking like C to an E, it went from looking like an E to a backwards E, which is what we call the C clef. The other clef that was developed was this clef, which we refer to as the treble clef, meaning it's high up. And again, if we take a good close look at this, you'll see that right in here is your letter G. Now, just put a little, you can see. So this treble clef here is actually the letter name G. And then developed this other clef for the basses, which went like this. And what this is if you take these dots and connect them, I think you can see this is actually the letter F. So a clef system was developed, and the little italicized B sort of got dropped for a while. And we went to these clefs, and today we still use these 3 clefs. You have what's called the bass clef, the F clef, which tells us where the letter name F is on the bottom staff. On the higher staff of the grand staff, we have the treble clef, which is actually the letter G, and the invisible line that goes down the center, which is C, would use this clef, the C clef. Now the C clef has been used for the viola, and they're the only ones in the orchestra that have that clef. Violin players usually razz them a lot for having their own clef and being one step off from everybody else. Violas are proud of the fact that they have their own clef, and they've had to learn to use it. This C clef was also used, placed on different lines over the years to show the bass, treble, show all the trebles, the alto and the soprano, and later placed lower on the staff to show the tenors and the baritones and the basses. But this eventually became what's known as the transposition, or I'm going to refer to it as the tranny clef. And the trans clef, the transposition clef happened is people use that to be able to put C wherever they want. So in the case of the viola, you take and put this here, put a dot on either side so it's in the center line, right down the center, and this becomes the reference point for C. All right, now we're running out of time because in 15 minutes, Angel has a student coming, and we may not be able to finish what I have to say about the clefs today. But here's the thing that I'd like to point out that's the most important. In order to learn these clefs, first of all, they don't tell you it's an Old English way of writing a letter. So all you have is the letter G, you have the letter F, and you have the letter C. That's it. And if we look at the grand staff, and then we have this down here, clefs were only placed on lines because they're really just a way of going X marks the spot. You know, on the treasure map, the pirates had the X marks the spot. X's were used as a mark because people couldn't spell and they couldn't write their name, so everybody had an X, some way of writing an X to put their name, and so X marks the spot, or personalized things. And so what we have in this system here is we take and we place right here on that line, the dot, pull it down like this, and then put 2 dots on either side of it, and this is telling us where the letter F is at on that system. Here in the middle, we have an invisible line that goes across, and the reason for the invisible line is because the staff has 6 spaces, not 4, and the other staff has 6 spaces, that is a space here, a space here, we have a space here and a space here. You are going space line, space line, space line, space line, space line, space line, space line. And the system doesn't do that. Since it's going space line, space line, it's implied that there is a line in between these two spaces. And these spaces here create the need for this invisible line. Again, something that no one explains unless you go study history. You'll see that this became C. So we could officially do something as simple as this. Write in a ledger line and put our C clef right there. Then what they did is we took the G clef, and the G clef was placed right here on that line. Since this was the second line from the top, the second line from the bottom became the position for the G clef, and this told us this was C and this was G. Now I'm going to show you something again that most people, even people who've been doing this for a while, don't really realize. If we look at the letter C and we count down 1, 2, 3, 4, I'm counting C, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, that the C goes down to the F in a fifth. And the fifth is really important because it's the first really perfect interval. And in the overtone series, if you were to take the frequency and multiply it by the number 3, the frequency that you will get will be a note that is musically 5 notes away from the note you started with. Now, if we go down 5 notes, the C goes down to F, 5 notes. But if you look, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, the G is up a fifth. And this is the placement of the clefs. And again, what we've done is we've dropped the C clef because it's an invisible line, so the clef's invisible. And we've lost in history now why that was done, why the center line is invisible, and we've lost the use of this clef. So the C transposition clef right there between the two staffs on the invisible line, 5 notes up, we have the G, and 5 notes below it, we have the F reference line. And that's the system that we're using today. Now, in order to help people learn this, and I'll end it right after this section, I have a whole lot more I want to say about this, which I'll talk about next week. But they came up with mnemonic ways of being able to remember this stuff. So, for the treble clef, people came up with these little mnemonic games. They realized that if this is G, then this is A, and this is F. And right there they noticed that the first, it's not in my, this is the first space in my book, so that's the second space. They call it the first space. There was an F, there was an A, and lo and behold, A, B, C, D, E, out came the word face. So people teach to this day this mnemonic of all the 4 spaces spell the word face. Then what we have is here, F, go back, A, G, F, E would be right here on that line, low E, and they developed this other little mnemonic system that says every G, good, B, boy, D, now there's D and F. Now there's 2 ways of doing this. Every good boy deserves fudge is one system. Every good boy deserves fudge. And another one is every good boy does fine. Now every good boy does fine is a little bit more nonsensy, and so over the years it's caught on. Every good boy deserves fudge didn't catch on, and I've only seen that in books from Great Britain, the UK, and Ireland, and stuff like that. So the Celts tried to make some kind of sense out of this. So this is the way people learn it. So we learn our every good boy does fine. And these are the 5 lines. For the bass clef, they've developed another 2 poems, or these are known as mnemonic systems, which are part of a memorization technique to help you remember things. And again, out there in the world, here we have our bass clef, which we know is the letter F, right? And from this F, we could count G, F, E, D, C, B, A, G. And the bottom line is G, B, D, F, of course, and A. And what they used, the mnemonic that they used for this one was, good boyfriends don't forget anniversaries. Good boyfriends don't forget anniversaries. Good boyfriends don't forget anniversaries for the bass clef. And I had to learn this one because I played French horn. And French horn not only uses the treble clef a lot, but it goes into the bass clef. The other thing is I had to learn the C clef because French horn get a lot of flute music or violin music, and they have to transpose it for the French horn quite often in the orchestra. So the use of the transposition clef, or the C clef, was something that I also had to learn. So I had to learn the treble clef, I had to learn the F bass clef, and I had to learn the C transposition clef as a young French horn player. And those 3 clefs just confused the bejesus out of me. So now we've got 3 little mnemonics. For the spaces, right here we have G, A, B, C, D, E, F, G. And what they came up with this is, all cows eat grass. All cows eat grass. So now here you have the 4 mnemonics for memorizing. If you're a piano player and you get this grand staff where they unify these 2 staffs together like this, and remember you have your ledger line invisible C in the middle, what happened is people had to learn all 4 of these little mnemonics in order to have the thing. So good boys don't forget anniversaries are the lines to the bass clef. All cows eat grass are the 4 spaces for the bass clef. We have every good boy does fine, or every good boy does fudge, or deserves fudge, which is my favorite. And then we have here F, A, C, E. And this tells us the way that people teach how to memorize the names of the lines and spaces. Now, here's the problem. 1, you've got 4 things to remember, which is like way too much. And 2, not a single one of these show us how to do it backwards. Every one of these is defining this as going up the staff, up the staff, up the staff, up the staff, and saying even face, E-C-A-F, E-C-A-F, is not that easy. And there's no mnemonic poem for memorizing E-C-A-F. There's no mnemonic poem for F-D-B-G-E. There's no mnemonic poem for A-F-D-B-G. There is no mnemonic for G-E-C-A. And so the problem is using this system, it's really, you got a lot to remember, and it'll help you read up the staff, but you cannot read down the staff. So what I'm going to do is show you what we've been doing here at the classroom to help people memorize this. What we had to do was take these 5 things and extend it for 2 more to get 7 notes, and we came up with a mnemonic that goes from the middle C, which is cows. Then you have the bottom lines of the staff. Cows eat grass, but don't fly, and then one ledger line above, airplanes. Cows eat grass, but don't fly airplanes. And it turns out this can be used anywhere on any of the staffs. If I'm going to use it for the G clef, I just say grass, but don't fly airplanes, cows eat. And if I need to do it from F, fly airplanes, cows eat grass, but don't fly airplanes. So this, if you learn this, C, E, G, B, D, F, A, and you learn to turn this way, not only will you have all the lines on any of the clefs, anywhere, you can use this to find any clef anywhere. We can use the C clef, and the reason we start with C is because it's that middle invisible line. So we can do that any place, but also this is every other note, and that is the way chords are usually built. Chords are usually written like this, and kids call them snowmen. You put three little things over, or you have space, 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 and what this does is this gives you the letter names for spelling all of the chords. C, E, G, your C chord. B, D, F, your B chord. A, C, E, your A chord. F, A, C, your F chord, etc., etc. So this could be used for labeling all of the lines and all of the spaces, because if I start here, fly, airplanes, cows, eat, grass, but don't fly, etc., etc. I can label any line or any space using this pattern. This is called the circle of thirds, and the circle of thirds also helps us to memorize the spelling for every chord in our system. Okay? Now, backwards. Cows eat grass, but don't fly airplanes. Going down, we'd be going C, A, F, D, B, G, E. And for this we have can, A, farm, dog, bite, green, eggs. Cows eat grass but don't fly airplanes. We could even put an A on this side if you want and say all cows eat grass but don't fly airplanes. And from the middle C down through your bass clef, don't worry, Angel, he can walk in. We have cows, can, A, farm, dog, bite, green, and eggs. Can. So for doing all the lines,
it's locked.
For doing all the lines here, we have can, A, farm, dog, bite, green, eggs. And for going from C up, we have all cows eat grass but don't fly airplanes. So we have our student coming right now. I'm going to end this at the moment, and next week what I'm going to do is pick up on this and show you some other ways of conquering this ability to write chords coming from the bottom up or from the top down. And we will also extend this, and I'll explain more about the staff and how it's been used. For instance, all the clefs are put on a line, and the problem with putting them on a line, there's no way of making one of the spaces the number 1. So again, that little B, italicized B, that flat, was brought back, and it had a little mate called a sharp, and the accidentals were used to create what's called a key signature, which allowed us to move the number 1 not on all the lines, but also down onto the spaces. So we will continue next week to show you how this system has evolved and how it is being taught, and then we will show you, just like I showed you here, our little quick ways of getting over it. So you have one poem to learn going up to every line or every space on any clef, no matter what it is, and you have one poem that you learn in which they go down. And as far as I know, we're the only people that have a system that help you read down the staff, and that's just as important. So until next week, hope you're all well. Hope you all didn't gain too much weight on Turkey Day, and we'll see you next week at 7:30, same time, same place.